Empower Audio likes to thank you all being here. Please share, like, comments, and subscribe our channel for more contents. Let's dive into the audiobook. There are certain teachings that do more than motivate us. They reshape the way we think. They shift the way we show up. They invite us to rise into a wiser, calmer, more intentional version of ourselves. That is the kind of influence this body of work has had on millions of people across decades. It speaks to something deeply human inside us, the part that wants to grow with purpose and live with integrity. We live in a world where people are constantly busy, yet rarely fulfilled. Many are overwhelmed, rushing from one demand to the next, without ever pausing to ask if the direction they are moving in is the direction they actually want. These teachings offer that pause. They offer clarity. They offer a return to the inner self that many people lose in the noise and pressure of everyday life. What makes this framework so powerful is that it is rooted in principles that do not change with trends or seasons. It goes beyond techniques and productivity tricks. It focuses on character. It focuses on personal responsibility. It focuses on aligning your inner world so your outer world can follow. That timeless wisdom is what Stephen Covey brought forward in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. As I studied these ideas, I realized why the book has remained relevant for so long. It does not push you toward doing more. It invites you to become more. It shows you that real effectiveness comes from clarity, from values, from aligning your behaviors with the person you want to be. These insights soften the noise that often fills the mind. They help you hear your own truth again. Every lesson in this work nudges you toward internal growth. It asks you to take ownership of your responses, rather than letting circumstances dictate them. It asks you to create a vision, rather than drift through your days. It asks you to prioritize what matters, rather than getting lost in what is urgent. And that is why this book continues to influence so many lives. It teaches you how to lead yourself. Stephen Covey's writing resonates because it speaks to universal experiences. We all want better relationships. We all want clarity. We all want to feel effective in our work and grounded in our decisions. That is why The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People remains a guide for leaders, parents, creators, students, and anyone who wants to live a life that feels aligned and meaningful. As you absorb these ideas, you begin noticing how they shape everything you touch. You communicate differently. You set boundaries with more ease. You make decisions with more confidence. You become someone who listens, someone who understands, someone who leads from calm intention rather than emotional reactivity. And people feel that. The world responds differently to a person who is anchored inside themselves. These teachings endure because they help you become someone you respect. They strengthen your integrity. They help you build relationships grounded in trust and clarity. And they guide you back to your own inner compass when life feels chaotic. This is why Stephen Covey's work matters. It gives you a structure to grow into the best version of yourself, not through pressure, but through principle. And as you begin to integrate these ideas, you may find that effectiveness is not something you chase. It is something you become. As I began working with the ideas inside this book, one of the first insights that truly shifted something in me was the understanding that personal power begins with awareness. You cannot change what you are not aware of. You cannot lead your life while you are asleep to your patterns. And so this work invites you to wake up, to notice where you often react without thinking, to notice the moments where you give your peace away, to notice how easily your mood can be shaped by someone else's behavior. Stephen Covey often taught that effectiveness starts with reclaiming that inner space, the space between what happens and how you respond. The moment you realize you have that space, you begin to rewrite your story. There is a profound strength that grows when you choose your response instead of surrendering to impulse. You start to feel more grounded, more centered, more confident in your ability to handle life as it comes. You stop waiting for everything around you to be perfect. Instead, you stabilize yourself from the inside. And when you stabilize from the inside, you stop being thrown around by the unpredictability of the external world. You become someone who moves with intention. Once this inner awareness strengthens, a new kind of clarity begins to rise. You start asking yourself deeper questions. What am I actually building with my life? Who am I becoming? What direction am I moving in? These are the questions that shape your path. If you do not ask them, you drift. But if you learn to ask and answer them sincerely, your life gains direction. That is what the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People encourages you to do. It nudges you to see your life as something you design, not something you endure. When I first sat with the idea of beginning with the end in mind, I realized how often people work hard without truly knowing why they are working. They chase goals that look good from the outside, but feel empty on the inside. They move so fast that they forget to ask if the path they are on is even their path. But when you pause long enough to imagine the version of yourself you want to grow into, clarity begins to soften the confusion. You begin to see that your daily choices are not random. They are votes for the person you want to become. Something powerful happens when you imagine your future self clearly. Your current habits start to shift naturally. You start choosing what strengthens you. You start letting go of what drains you. You start organizing your life around meaning rather than pressure. You start walking with direction rather than drifting. And as this vision becomes clearer, something else begins to rise within you. Discipline. Discipline becomes easier when you know what you are saying yes to. It becomes easier to turn away from distractions when you know the future you are building. You no longer see discipline as punishment. You see it as devotion. Devotion to your values. Devotion to your vision. Devotion to the life you want to inhabit. Stephen Covey understood that when your actions align with your deeper purpose, discipline becomes a form of love. From this place of clarity, you begin to understand the difference between urgency and importance. This may be one of the most valuable lessons I have learned. Urgent things shout. They demand attention. They spark anxiety. They make you feel like you must respond immediately. But important things whisper. They require stillness. They require presence. They require intention. The important things are the ones that build your future, strengthen your relationships, nourish your body, and deepen your spirit. They do not scream for you. You must choose them. When you begin to put first things first, your life transforms. It is not because you suddenly have more time. It is because you reclaim your time. You begin to notice how much energy you used to spend on things that added nothing to your growth. You realize how often you said yes when you meant no. You see how often you filled your schedule with activity instead of meaning. But with this new awareness, your priorities shift. You give time to what matters instead of what pressures you. You protect your energy instead of scattering it. You move with intention rather than impulse. This shift also affects the way you relate to others. When you start seeing your own life with clarity, you become more generous in how you see other people. You begin recognizing that most people are doing the best they can with the awareness they have. And that realization softens you. It brings a sense of compassion into your interactions. It encourages you to seek mutual benefit instead of competition. This is the heart of a win-win mindset. A win-win mindset does not mean pleasing others or avoiding conflict. It means looking for solutions that honor both you and the other person. It means bringing fairness, respect, and creativity into your relationships. It means refusing to build your success on someone else's loss. And something beautiful happens when you live with this intention. People trust you. They open up to you. They feel safe with you. And from that safety, real connection grows. But connection requires something even deeper: understanding. And this is where one of the most transformative teachings emerges. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. When I first began practicing this, I realized how often I listened only so I could respond. How often I interpreted someone's words through my own filters instead of hearing what they truly meant. How often I moved fast in conversations, trying to fix, defend, or explain. But when I slowed down, when I listened without planning my reply, something opened. People felt seen. Their guard softened. Their voice steadied. Their truth came forward. When someone feels understood, they no longer feel the need to fight. Understanding dissolves tension. It creates a bridge between two worlds. It is one of the most powerful tools you can bring into any relationship, whether personal or professional. Stephen Covey taught this often because he knew that communication is not about winning. It is about connecting. Once understanding becomes the foundation, a new kind of creativity can emerge. You begin to discover the power of synergy. This is the moment when collaboration becomes richer than anything either person could produce alone. It is what happens when you bring openness instead of defensiveness, curiosity instead of assumption, courage instead of protection. Synergy is not compromise. It is creation. It is the magic that happens when different strengths, different perspectives, and different ideas meet in a space of respect. And as all these skills develop, you come to the final and perhaps most essential lesson: the need for renewal. You cannot be effective if you are depleted. You cannot be wise if you are exhausted. You cannot be present if you are scattered. Renewal is not something you earn. It is something you must protect. Your body needs movement and rest. Your mind needs learning and quiet. Your heart needs connection and joy. Your spirit needs meaning and reflection. When you care for yourself in these ways, everything becomes easier. Your patience increases. Your clarity sharpens. Your focus strengthens. Your relationships heal. Your purpose deepens. Renewal is the foundation that holds everything together. It keeps you strong, resilient, and aligned. These are the teachings that began shaping my own life, and the more I practiced them, the more I realized this is not a list of habits. It is a way of being, a way of walking through the world that helps you stay centered, grounded, and effective, no matter what life brings. As I continued reflecting on these ideas, I realized something important. Growth never happens in the moments when life is easy. Growth happens in the space where you pause instead of react, listen instead of defend, and choose instead of default. That space is the real curriculum. The teachings from Stephen Covey simply shine a light on that space so you can see it more clearly. There is a moment each day when you notice your old patterns rising. Maybe it is frustration. Maybe it is impatience. Maybe it is the urge to rush, to argue, to shut down, to give up. In the past, those patterns might have swept you away without a second thought. But once you understand the principles behind effective living, you begin to witness those moments instead of being controlled by them. You feel yourself choosing differently. You feel yourself acting from intention instead of emotion. And this is where your life quietly begins to transform. When you notice your reactions softening, you also start to see possibilities you could not see before. You start imagining new paths for your future. You start realizing that you are not stuck. You are not behind. You are not defined by your past. You are simply at a point in your journey where greater clarity is becoming available to you. And clarity is always the beginning of transformation. One of the most powerful shifts that came with internal clarity was the ability to separate what is truly important from what simply feels familiar. Many people confuse routine with purpose. They stay busy because busyness feels safe. It feels productive. It feels like forward motion. But when you really pause and look at your life, you begin to notice that activity is not the same as impact. Constant motion is not the same as meaningful progress. When you begin applying these principles to your days, your attention sharpens. You start noticing where you are leaking energy. You start noticing where you overgive, where you overcommit, where you avoid, where you stay small to keep the peace. You start noticing where fear has been making decisions for you. And once you see these things, you can no longer live unconsciously. You begin to choose with more intention. This intention naturally spills over into how you relate to others. Relationships begin to feel different. You stop approaching conversations as battles to win. You stop needing to be right. You stop interpreting others through your own fears or assumptions. Instead, you show up with curiosity, with presence, with patience. You show up wanting to understand, not just to respond. And because of that, the people in your life feel safer. They feel more open. They feel more willing to meet you halfway. And when understanding deepens, your influence grows. Not because you speak louder or work harder, but because your presence becomes more grounded. People trust those who listen. They trust those who do not react impulsively. They trust those who are consistent in how they show up. This is what Covey meant when he spoke about character being more important than technique. Techniques work temporarily. Character works forever. There is also a beautiful shift that happens in your own sense of identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who can handle things, someone who can make wise decisions, someone who can stay centered even when life feels chaotic. And that inner trust makes you braver. It makes you clearer. It makes you more confident in setting boundaries, pursuing goals, and expressing your truth. With this deeper self-trust, you start to treat your time differently. You become more selective. You begin honoring your energy instead of sacrificing it. You realize that every yes holds a weight because every yes is also a no to something else. And so you start saying yes only to what aligns with your vision. You stop chasing every opportunity. You stop scattering yourself. You begin focusing on what nourishes you, challenges you, and grows you. This natural realignment leads to more harmony in your life. Not perfection, but harmony. Harmony between your values and your actions. Harmony between your goals and your habits. Harmony between your words and your behavior. This harmony is one of the quietest but most powerful forms of effectiveness. When your life aligns, you become unstoppable. And along the way, something else rises. A deeper appreciation for the people in your life. You start noticing their efforts. You start understanding their fears. You start seeing the good in them, even when they struggle to see it in themselves. You become someone who brings calmness into the room. Someone who diffuses tension. Someone who listens with care. Someone who communicates with kindness. And when you carry that energy, your relationships naturally deepen. These teachings also revealed to me that growth does not happen in isolation. We need each other. We need different perspectives, different strengths, different ideas. We are not meant to do everything alone. The moment you stop seeing differences as threats and begin seeing them as resources, you open the door to synergy. That is when creativity expands. That is when better solutions emerge. That is when collaboration becomes something you look forward to rather than something you avoid. And through it all, the most important realization might be this: you cannot pour from an empty place. You cannot give what you do not have. Renewal is essential. Renewal is what keeps your spirit alive and your mind clear. Renewal is what allows you to stay grounded in who you are becoming. It is what helps you show up with patience, with clarity, with compassion. Without renewal, even the best intentions collapse. So you learn to rest without guilt. You learn to reflect without judgment. You learn to care for your body, nourish your mind, and reconnect with your inner purpose. You become someone who honors yourself, not as an afterthought, but as a priority. Because when you care for your inner world, everything in your outer world becomes smoother and more aligned. This is the heart of these teachings. They show you that your life is not changed through one dramatic moment. It changes through small, intentional choices, repeated with consistency. It changes through presence, through awareness, through the courage to choose a better version of yourself even when it feels uncomfortable at first. And each time you choose the better version of yourself, you strengthen it. As these principles deepen in your life, something begins to shift that is subtle at first, but becomes unshakable over time. You start developing a different kind of self-respect, not the kind that comes from accomplishments or praise, but the kind that grows from honoring your own choices. It is the feeling that rises when you act in alignment with your values, the feeling that grows when you keep your word to yourself, the feeling that expands when you show up for your future self, even when the present moment tries to pull you off track. This is one of the quiet blessings of the teachings Stephen Covey shared. They invite you to build your confidence, not from external validation, but from internal consistency. And that consistency becomes a foundation you can trust. It becomes the place you return to when life gets noisy or unpredictable. It becomes the anchor that keeps you steady. As you keep practicing these ideas, you may notice that your relationship with mistakes changes too. Instead of shaming yourself or spiraling when things do not go as planned, you begin to see mistakes as information, as feedback, as something neutral that helps you adjust rather than something that defines you. This simple shift removes so much unnecessary suffering. You stop treating failure as a verdict and begin treating it as part of the process. And when you stop fearing mistakes, you free yourself to take bigger risks. You give yourself permission to start things, to experiment, to learn, to evolve. This is when your growth accelerates. This is when you start stepping into opportunities you once avoided. This is when you begin trusting yourself enough to follow your vision, even if others do not fully understand it yet. Another powerful shift happens in how you handle conflict. Once you start living with intention, you realize that conflict is not something to fear, but something to navigate skillfully. You learn to slow down instead of escalating. You start listening for what is underneath the words people say. You look for solutions rather than victories. You lean into understanding instead of trying to win. And this approach changes everything. Conversations that once triggered defensiveness now become opportunities for clarity. Interactions that used to drain you now feel more manageable because you are anchored in principle rather than emotion. One thing Stephen Covey often emphasized was that trust is built in the small moments. It is built through consistency, honesty, and the courage to act with integrity, even when it is inconvenient. When you live with these principles guiding you, People feel that trustworthiness in your energy. You do not have to announce it. You embody it. And that embodiment influences every relationship you touch. You also begin noticing your emotional patterns more clearly. You start understanding why certain situations trigger you. You start recognizing that your reactions often come from old wounds or old stories. And once you recognize this, you can choose differently. You can pause, you can breathe, you can respond from the person you are becoming rather than the person you once were. This is not always easy, but it is always powerful. As you keep integrating these teachings, your capacity for patience grows. You stop rushing through your days. You stop forcing outcomes. You begin trusting the timeline of your life. You begin trusting that clarity unfolds as you grow. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are moving with intention, and that confidence radiates into everything you do. Relationships become more compassionate, decisions become clearer, boundaries become easier to hold. You stop seeking permission and start following your inner compass. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop apologizing for your growth. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You begin standing in your truth with softness and strength. And in the midst of this growth, another beautiful realization emerges. You begin understanding your own worth more deeply, not because of what you achieve, but because of who you are becoming. There is a sense of inner dignity that rises when you align your behavior with your values. You carry yourself differently. You speak with more clarity. You act with more courage. You trust yourself more fully. This trust ripples outward. It influences your work, your relationships, your decisions, and the opportunities that come your way. When you are grounded in your inner world, the outer world starts reflecting that steadiness. People respond differently to you. They feel your clarity. They sense your presence. They respect your consistency. Part of what makes the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People so enduring is that it helps you build this inner foundation. Stephen Covey did not write to make people perform better. He wrote to help people become better, wiser, more aligned, and more conscious. He wrote to help people cultivate character, and when character grows, every part of life improves. Over time, you may also notice that your definition of success begins to evolve. Instead of chasing approval, you start seeking alignment. Instead of seeking control, you seek understanding. Instead of seeking perfection, you seek growth. And this new definition of success feels lighter. It feels more authentic. It feels like you are finally living from your center instead of living from the expectations of others. And as you continue practicing these principles, another truth becomes clear. You cannot create an extraordinary life without also caring for your inner world. Renewal becomes essential. Rest becomes sacred. Reflection becomes nourishment. You start realizing that your well-being is not something you add on at the end of your to-do list. It is part of your effectiveness. It is part of your leadership. It is part of your identity. So you begin making space for practices that restore you: time in nature, stillness, movement, learning, creativity, connection. You give yourself permission to slow down. You honor your energy instead of pushing it past its limits. You begin to treat yourself with more tenderness, and that tenderness strengthens you more than any hustle ever could. This balance of strength and softness is what these teachings ultimately cultivate. A person who is intentional but flexible, confident but humble, consistent but compassionate, focused but open. These qualities create a life that feels grounded, meaningful, and steady, even in uncertain times. And the more deeply you embody these qualities, the more your life begins to feel like it is truly yours. As you live more intentionally, something very real begins to shift in the way you carry yourself. You start to move through the world with a kind of quiet clarity that does not need to prove anything to anyone. You stop reacting to every small disruption. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop rushing. You begin walking with a sense of direction that can only come from knowing your own values. And as that clarity grows, something else begins to rise beside it: trust. You start trusting yourself more, trusting your instincts, trusting your decisions, trusting your ability to handle whatever comes. That trust does not appear overnight. It builds slowly. Each time you choose alignment over old habits, each time you pause instead of react, each time you honor a boundary, each time you choose long-term purpose over short-term comfort, trust becomes the quiet strength beneath your choices. One of the beautiful things Stephen Covey emphasized was that effectiveness is built from the inside out, not outside in. The world tells you to gather tools, techniques, strategies, shortcuts, but if your character is weak, none of those tools hold. If your inner world is scattered, no outer structure will save you. But when your foundation is aligned with principle, everything you build stands stronger, and in time, people begin to feel the difference in you. They feel the steadiness. They feel the calm. They feel the clarity. They feel the depth, and they respond to it. This does not mean life becomes simple or easy. You will still face challenges. You will still experience fear, frustration, disappointment, or uncertainty. But your relationship with those experiences changes. Instead of being overwhelmed, you become someone who can sit with discomfort without losing yourself in it. Instead of spiraling into old patterns, you begin choosing responses that reflect who you want to be, rather than who you used to be. This is one of the most empowering transformations a person can experience. When you begin to see that you have the ability to guide your inner experience, you stop making your peace conditional on outside events. You stop waiting for other people to behave differently before you feel grounded. You stop relying on circumstances to create your calm. You start creating that calm within yourself. That is the turning point. When your internal life becomes steady, your external life becomes manageable. You also begin noticing something subtle but powerful. You no longer try to control everything. Control is a form of fear, and when fear drives your life, your effectiveness suffers. But when you anchor yourself in principles and clarity, you do not need control. You trust yourself enough to navigate whatever arises. You trust your values to guide you. You trust your ability to rebuild or adapt. You trust that solutions will appear when you meet life with presence rather than panic. That trust allows you to loosen your grip, to soften, to breathe, and when you soften, your mind becomes more open. You begin to see possibilities that were invisible before. You begin to approach problems with creativity instead of stress. You begin to hold relationships with more grace. And you begin to experience life through a wider, deeper lens. This widening also brings new courage. Courage to speak honestly. Courage to pursue bigger goals. Courage to step forward even when you feel uncertain. Courage to let go of patterns or relationships that no longer reflect who you are becoming. Courage to expand. Courage is not loud. It is not forceful. It is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is the voice inside you that says, I can grow beyond this, even when the fear is loud. And with every small act of courage, your sense of self grows. As your inner world grows more aligned, your relationships evolve alongside it. You begin meeting people where they are, instead of where your expectations want them to be. You begin listening with empathy, rather than defensiveness. You become more patient with the imperfections of others because you have become more patient with your own. You begin understanding that everyone is fighting unseen battles, and that understanding opens your heart rather than hardening it. You become someone who adds peace to a room instead of tension. Someone who lifts conversations instead of draining them. Someone who communicates from clarity instead of emotional impulse. Someone who creates connection instead of conflict. This is the relational effectiveness Covey taught about. It is not about being agreeable, it is about being wise. And wisdom grows when you honor reflection. Reflection is where learning becomes integration. It is where insight becomes action. It is where experience becomes understanding. Reflection helps you see your blind spots. It helps you soften your ego. It helps you stay aligned with your deeper intention. Without reflection, you repeat old patterns. With reflection, you break them. Reflection also reveals where you are outgrowing old versions of yourself. You begin noticing that certain habits, certain roles, certain environments no longer match who you are becoming, and rather than clinging to them for comfort, you find the courage to let them go. Growth always asks you to release what no longer fits. And just like that, effectiveness becomes less about achievement and more about alignment. Less about performance and more about purpose. Less about doing and more about becoming. You begin to understand that the outer success people see is simply the reflection of the inner structure you have built. You are building something within you that no one can take away. A sense of self, a sense of clarity, a sense of groundedness, a sense of responsibility, a sense of compassion, a sense of steady intention. That is what makes a person effective, not their accomplishments. As you walk further into this understanding, your life begins to simplify. Not because you have fewer responsibilities, but because your inner world is no longer cluttered. You stop overthinking every small thing. You stop second-guessing your intuition. You stop trying to please everyone. You stop living in a hurry. You begin moving through your days with presence. And presence makes even the most ordinary moments meaningful. You begin to enjoy your own company. You begin to savor quiet. You begin to find joy in small things. You begin noticing nature again. You begin breathing more slowly. And in that slowing, you discover that effectiveness is not a race, it is a rhythm. A rhythm of choosing what matters, letting go of what does not, and showing up fully for the life you are creating. Everything starts to feel lighter when you live this way. Not because life is easier, but because you are steadier. You become someone who experiences difficulties without collapsing. Someone who experiences success without arrogance. Someone who navigates relationships without losing themselves. Someone who walks with purpose without forcing the path. This is what real effectiveness looks like. And if there is one truth Stephen Covey wanted readers to understand, it is that effectiveness is not a goal to reach. It is a practice, a life practice, a way of being, a commitment you renew every single day. As this way of living settles into your daily rhythm, you start to notice a quieter shift taking place inside you. It is subtle at first, almost unnoticeable, but it grows. You begin realizing that you do not need to force your life to move forward. You do not need to chase every opportunity. You do not need to exhaust yourself trying to earn worthiness. You begin trusting that the life you build through alignment will naturally carry you where you are meant to be. This trust becomes a form of inner freedom. You no longer wake up feeling behind. Instead, you wake up with a sense of direction, a sense of responsibility for your inner world, a sense of calm that does not depend on perfect circumstances. This is what Stephen Covey described when he spoke about living from principle rather than pressure. Pressure collapses your energy. Principles hold your energy steady. The steadier you become, the more clarity rises to the surface. You start seeing things in your life as they truly are, not as your habits or fears once painted them. You start recognizing patterns you no longer want to repeat. You start understanding which relationships help you grow and which ones hold you back. You start noticing which routines nourish you and which routines drain you. Your awareness becomes a kind of inner light. Awareness itself becomes transformative. You cannot change what you do not see, but once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Awareness pulls you forward. It invites you to grow. It calls you into becoming the next version of yourself. And even when the steps feel uncomfortable, you sense that you are moving in the right direction. This is where effectiveness becomes something deeper than habit. It becomes character development. You begin practicing patience, not because you are trying to be polite, but because you are honoring your own nervous system. You begin practicing responsibility, not because you are trying to impress anyone, but because it feels liberating to own your choices. You begin practicing clarity, not because it looks good, but because confusion is too heavy to carry. And slowly, you start realizing that the person you are becoming matters more than any single outcome you achieve. As this shift continues, your relationship with goals transforms too. Instead of chasing achievements for validation or comparison, you choose goals that align with your deeper purpose. You choose goals that support your growth. You choose goals that reflect who you want to become. And as your goals become more meaningful, your motivation becomes more steady. You no longer need bursts of inspiration. You move from intention. Intention feels different in the body. It feels calm. It feels grounded. It feels like clarity rising from the inside instead of pressure pushing from the outside. You begin approaching your days with that energy. You pause before saying yes. You pause before reacting. You pause before taking on responsibilities that do not belong to you. This pause becomes one of the greatest tools you carry. When you pause, you create space. When you create space, you choose more wisely. When you choose more wisely, your life strengthens. You begin noticing that your time is precious, not in a frantic way, but in a sacred way. You want your time to reflect your values. You want your energy to reflect your purpose. You want your days to reflect the person you are becoming. So you stop scattering yourself. You stop wasting energy on what drains you. You stop giving pieces of yourself away in places that do not honor your growth. This naturally leads you toward deeper boundaries. Not rigid walls, but healthy edges. Edges that keep your energy where it belongs. Edges that protect your peace. Edges that help you say yes only when your spirit agrees. Edges that remind you that honoring yourself is not selfishness, it is maturity. And from this maturity, relationships flourish. You begin communicating differently. You begin listening with more presence. You begin speaking with more honesty. You begin understanding others with more compassion. You begin approaching conflicts with curiosity rather than defensiveness. And as these relational practices deepen, connection becomes easier. Misunderstandings soften. Conversations open rather than close. You start realizing that effective communication is not about volume or speed. It is about presence. True presence can change the entire energy of a room. When you show up fully for one conversation, one moment, one person, people feel safe around you. They feel seen, they feel valued, and because of that, they respond to you with greater openness. This is where influence grows. Not from power, not from authority, not from force, but from presence. Covey wrote about this kind of influence as character-based, not technique-based. Technique can convince people briefly. Character convinces people permanently. The more grounded your presence becomes, the more synergy becomes possible. Synergy is that moment where ideas flow easily between people. It is the moment where different perspectives combine in a way that creates something richer, fuller, and more inspired. It is the moment when you realize you do not need to know everything because collaboration expands what is possible. Synergy is not forced, it is allowed. It arises when people feel respected, when they feel understood, when they feel safe to bring their full selves into the conversation. You create synergy, not by dominating the room, but by opening the room. And all of this, the presence, the clarity, the responsibility, the alignment, requires one essential thing: renewal. Renewal is the heartbeat of effectiveness. When you neglect renewal, everything feels harder. Decisions feel heavier. Relationships feel more fragile. Work feels more draining. But when you prioritize renewal, your mind clears, your heart softens, your energy returns. Renewal restores the foundation beneath you. Renewal is not about escape, it is about nourishment. It is about doing what brings you back into alignment with yourself. It may be rest, learning, nature, solitude, connection, movement, journaling, meditation, or deep breathing. Renewal can be quiet or active, but it always reconnects you to the part of you that remains steady even during difficult times. When you live with renewal, you begin entering each day with a more open heart. You begin seeing opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You begin responding to life with more strength and less fear. You begin trusting the path you are building, and you begin stepping into your life as someone who leads from the inside out. This is the true gift of these teachings. They help you create a life where your actions, your relationships, your choices, and your dreams all come from the same grounded place within you. A place of clarity, a place of intention, a place of quiet confidence. And once you begin living from that place, your entire world begins to transform. As this inner transformation continues to unfold, you begin to notice that the quality of your life is no longer determined by the number of tasks you complete, but by the level of presence you bring into each moment. Presence becomes your compass. Presence becomes your strength. Presence becomes the space where your best self lives. You discover that when you are present, you listen better, you think more clearly, you make wiser decisions, and you feel more grounded in your body. It is presence that allows you to respond instead of react. Presence that allows you to choose rather than default. Presence that transforms ordinary moments into meaningful stepping stones. Stephen Covey often spoke about private victories being the foundation for public victories, and this becomes clearer as you grow. Your private victories are not the achievements you display to the world, but the quiet moments when you choose patience over anger, clarity over confusion, responsibility over blame, intention over impulse. These victories are invisible to others, but they shape everything. They strengthen your character. They expand your inner stability. They help you become someone who is consistent in their values, even when circumstances test them. And life will always give you opportunities to practice. There will be moments when you are tired, moments when someone misunderstands you, moments when a plan breaks, moments when fear whispers doubts, moments when old patterns try to return. But these moments are not failures. They are classrooms. They are reminders. They are invitations to breathe, pause, and choose again. Each time you choose the higher response, you reinforce a new identity. You reinforce the person you are becoming. It is in these small, often unnoticed choices that transformation truly happens. Many people wait for a dramatic breakthrough before they allow themselves to change, but real growth happens quietly. It happens in how you wake up, in how you speak to yourself, in how you handle frustration, in how you schedule your time, in how you treat others, in how you show up when no one is watching. These are the moments that shape the architecture of your life. You begin to realize that your effectiveness is not separate from your humanity. It is not about becoming a machine of discipline or a perfect model of efficiency. Effectiveness is deeply human. It requires compassion for yourself, understanding of your emotional world, and acceptance of your imperfections. You learn to give yourself grace during the moments you fall short. Grace does not weaken you. It softens you enough to continue growing. With this softness, you begin holding others with more kindness. You start communicating in a way that honors both your truth and their humanity. You become more gentle in your tone, more thoughtful in your words, more sincere in your intentions. And because of that, your relationships shift into deeper alignment. People respond to your steadiness. They feel safer around you. They feel more understood. They feel more open to collaboration. This shift in communication is one of the most life-changing parts of this journey. You begin to see that understanding someone is not the same as agreeing with them. You can disagree and still be respectful. You can hold boundaries and still be loving. You can speak your truth and still be compassionate. When you live this way, you reduce conflict without silencing yourself. You elevate conversations rather than inflaming them. You become someone who brings clarity rather than confusion. As you grow in this emotional maturity, you begin noticing how often misunderstandings come from people speaking from fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being wrong, fear of being unseen, fear of losing connection. When you understand this, you stop taking things personally. You begin seeing beneath the surface of people's behavior. You begin listening not only to words, but to the emotions underneath them. This is a form of emotional intelligence that naturally strengthens your relationships. With strong relationships, your influence grows in a quiet, authentic way. You are not forcing people to change. You are inspiring them to rise. You are not trying to control outcomes. You are creating environments where growth becomes possible. This is leadership in its truest form. Leadership that begins within and expands outward through presence, character, and integrity. And as you continue integrating these teachings, you start understanding the importance of balancing courage and consideration. Courage without consideration becomes harsh. Consideration without courage becomes weakness. But when you balance both, you become a person who can communicate directly without being unkind. You become someone who can stand firm without being rigid. You become someone who can hold your values while respecting the values of others. This balance creates harmony in your life. It creates harmony in your relationships. It creates harmony in your sense of direction. Harmony is not perfection. Harmony is alignment. It is the feeling that your inner world is not fighting with your outer world. It is the feeling that your actions match your intentions. It is the sense that your life is gradually becoming more spacious, more peaceful, and more meaningful. And over time, you begin noticing that your relationship with time has changed. You stop feeling rushed. You stop feeling pulled in many directions. You stop filling your days with tasks that do not matter. You begin slowing down, not because you are doing less, but because you are doing what matters most. This is where time expands. This is where days feel fuller without feeling heavier. This is where you live life rather than chase it. You may also begin noticing that you feel more connected to your body. When you live with clarity and alignment, your nervous system relaxes. You breathe more deeply. Your mind feels less cluttered. You sleep more peacefully. Your body begins trusting that you are taking care of your life in a grounded way. Your entire system shifts. This deeper connection extends to your work as well. You begin working from a place of purpose instead of pressure. You begin choosing quality over quantity, depth over speed, clarity over chaos. You begin seeing that the work you do is not just about completion but contribution. You want your work to reflect your values. You want it to carry your integrity. You want it to serve something greater than your own productivity. Stephen Covey often reminded readers that effectiveness without meaning eventually becomes empty. As you grow, you begin searching for meaning in everything you do, meaning in how you spend your time, meaning in how you show up for others, meaning in how you use your gifts, meaning in how you live your days. This search for meaning deepens your sense of purpose. It makes your choices more intentional. It gives you a reason to show up fully each day. This is where a different kind of confidence begins to bloom. Not the confidence that comes from achievement or recognition, but the confidence that comes from living in alignment. Alignment gives you a sense of inner peace that does not depend on outcomes. It gives you the courage to pursue bigger goals because you trust yourself. It gives you the resilience to move through challenges with grace. It gives you a feeling of grounded stability that others can sense. And eventually, you realize something profound. Everything you have been learning is not about becoming someone else. It is about returning to yourself, the self beneath fear, the self beneath conditioning, the self beneath expectations, the self you were meant to become, a self who leads with integrity, a self who chooses with clarity, a self who listens with presence, a self who speaks with honesty, a self who lives with purpose, a self who is effective because they are aligned. This is the heart of what Stephen Covey wanted to teach, that effectiveness is not production, it is character, that success is not achievement, it is alignment, and that real leadership begins with how you lead yourself. As this inner work continues, you begin to see that effectiveness is not just about how you manage your days, but about how you manage your inner world. You start to notice that your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs shape everything you experience. And rather than being swept away by old mental patterns, you begin to observe them with more curiosity. You start asking yourself, is this belief supporting who I am becoming, or keeping me tied to who I used to be? This honest reflection becomes a turning point. You begin to release beliefs that no longer serve you. Beliefs that say you must prove yourself. Beliefs that say you are behind. Beliefs that say you have to carry everything alone. Beliefs that say conflict is dangerous. Beliefs that say change is risky. These beliefs may have protected you in the past, but they are too small for the person you are growing into now. And as you gently let them go, you notice a sense of spaciousness opening inside you. This spaciousness invites new possibilities. You begin imagining bigger dreams. You begin recognizing your own capabilities. You begin believing that your future is not limited by your past. You begin understanding that effectiveness is not about controlling everything. It is about being open to growth. Stephen Covey spoke often about living from a growth mindset, where challenges are teachers and setbacks are simply part of the journey. When you embrace this mindset, you stop fearing mistakes. Instead, you learn from them. You stop fearing discomfort. Instead, you grow through it. You stop fearing uncertainty. Instead, you meet it with curiosity. This shift from fear to curiosity, is one of the most liberating experiences you can have. It frees your mind, it frees your heart, it frees your creativity. Creativity flourishes when your nervous system feels safe. When you begin living with more intention and clarity, your creativity expands naturally. You begin seeing solutions instead of problems. You begin imagining new paths instead of feeling stuck. You begin approaching your work with fresh ideas. This creative energy does not come from force, it comes from alignment. Alignment is what turns your life into a meaningful expression of your values. It is what allows you to feel proud of the person you are becoming. It is what makes you wake up with purpose instead of dread. Alignment does not happen overnight. It happens through small decisions, stacked consistently. Decisions that honor your vision, decisions that honor your relationships, decisions that honor your energy. As you continue aligning your life, you start to see patterns that once felt invisible. You notice how often you used to rush. You notice how often you used to agree to things out of guilt. You notice how often you used to silence your own needs to keep peace. And without shaming yourself, you gently choose a different response. You begin showing up more honestly, more boldly, more compassionately. This is not a collapse into selfishness. It is a rise into self-leadership. With stronger self-leadership, your boundaries become clearer. You begin understanding that a boundary is not a wall. It is a guideline that protects your energy so you can show up fully. You say no with respect. You say yes with intention. You stop abandoning yourself in the name of being easy to love. Instead, you learn that being clear is one of the most honest forms of care. This clarity also deepens your compassion. You begin recognizing that the behaviors of others often come from their conditioning, their fears, their wounds, their struggles. When you see this, judgment softens. You become less reactive. You become more understanding. You become more patient. Compassion does not mean letting others cross your boundaries. It means you understand their humanity without giving up your own well-being. As your compassion grows, your communication transforms. You begin speaking from a place of grounded truth rather than from emotional heat. You begin listening to hear rather than to defend. You begin giving people space to express themselves fully. And something beautiful happens. People start opening up to you. They trust you with their truth. They feel safe in your presence. This is the kind of influence Covey described influence, rooted in trust, not control. Trust becomes a foundational part of your life. You trust yourself more. You trust your intuition more. You trust your ability to make aligned decisions. You trust that you can handle uncertainty. And because you trust yourself, others begin trusting you. Trust creates stability in relationships. Stability allows for connection. Connection creates joy. Over time, you start noticing a shift in the way you see challenges. A challenge is no longer a threat to your worthiness. It becomes an opportunity to practice the person you are becoming. When something difficult happens, you breathe before reacting. When someone misunderstands you, you stay grounded instead of collapsing into defensiveness. When obstacles appear, you tap into creativity instead of panic. This is the personal power Covey hoped people would experience. The kind of power that is quiet, steady, and deeply rooted. Not the power to control others, but the power to lead yourself. And as you step into this leadership, your life naturally becomes more peaceful. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer pulled into every storm. You start recognizing which storms are yours to address, and which storms belong to someone else. You stop stepping into battles that drain your spirit. You stop carrying responsibilities that are not yours. You stop trying to fix everything and everyone. This letting go creates enormous space within you. Space for rest, space for joy, space for creativity, space for authenticity, space for presence, and presence is the root of a meaningful life. With greater presence, you begin savoring your experiences instead of rushing through them. You notice beauty in places you once ignored. You appreciate small moments of calm. You listen more deeply to the people you love. You feel more connected to your body, your breath, your intuition. You begin to live life instead of simply passing through it. This is the shift from effectiveness as doing to effectiveness as being. Being grounded, being intentional, being compassionate, being awake. Eventually, you begin to see that this entire journey has been guiding you back to yourself, the self that knows how to choose wisely, the self that knows how to honor your values, the self that knows how to respond with clarity, the self that knows how to grow, the self that knows how to lead. And as you settle into this version of yourself, you begin feeling a sense of peace rise within you, a peace that does not depend on circumstances, a peace that comes from living in alignment with your inner truth, a peace that comes from knowing you are becoming someone you can trust. This peace is the true reward of this work. As we come to the end of this journey, I want you to pause for a moment and notice something subtle but powerful. Notice how different you feel from when you began. Notice the calm that sits a little deeper in your body. Notice the clarity that feels a little closer. Notice the sense of possibility that has opened inside you. This is the quiet impact of doing inner work, the impact of returning to yourself. Everything you have heard in this audiobook is not just information, it is an invitation to walk into your life with more awareness, more intention, and more compassion. An invitation to lead yourself with the same steadiness and honesty you wish came naturally to the world around you. An invitation to grow into the version of yourself that feels true, meaningful, and aligned. Stephen Covey wrote, "The 7 habits of highly effective people, not as a set of rules, but as a pathway, a way of living that helps you rise above reactivity and step into purpose, a way of grounding yourself in principles that outlast pressure, a way of understanding that real change is possible when you begin from within." And now you have walked that path, not perfectly, not all at once, but steadily, honestly, with presence. As you move forward, remember that nothing in your life changes overnight, but everything in your life can change with consistent intention. Every time you pause before reacting, you are shaping a new future. Every time you choose your values over your habits, you are rewriting your story. Every time you speak with honesty, listen with compassion, or act with integrity, you are strengthening a new identity inside you. This is not the end of the journey. This is the beginning of a deeper one. From here forward, you will see your patterns more clearly. You will understand your relationships more fully. You will choose your energy more wisely. You will protect your peace more confidently. You will create your life with more awareness, more courage, and more presence. You will fail at times. You will forget. You will get pulled back into old habits. But you will remember again. You will redirect again. You will choose again. Growth is not linear. Growth is cyclical. You return to the same lessons again and again, each time with deeper wisdom. So as you step back into your life, carry this truth with you. You are capable of becoming someone you deeply respect. You are capable of leading your life with intention. You are capable of responding with clarity. You are capable of building strong, meaningful relationships. You are capable of peace. You are capable of purpose. You are capable of effectiveness that comes from within. Let these teachings move with you into your days. Let them soften your reactions. Let them strengthen your boundaries. Let them ground your purpose. Let them guide your decisions. And let them remind you that who you are becoming is far more powerful than anything you have been. Thank you for being here. Thank you for walking this journey. Thank you for choosing growth over comfort and clarity over distraction. This has been Empower Audio. Until next time, may you continue to rise into the deepest and most aligned version of yourself. Thank you so much. Peace. Empower Audio.